Evolution of Snow White. Snow White makes her debut in the 1916 silent romantic movie, Snow White, portrayed by Marguerite Clark. This movie is adapted from Winthrop Ames's 1912 Broadway play Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which was in turn adapted from the 1812 fairy tale. Here Snow White lives with the conceited Queen Brangamar, who made a deal with a witch long ago to become queen. In return, the witch asks Snow White's heart. Later, Queen Brangamar calls out the huntsman Berthold and commands him to take Snow White into the woods. However, after an internal struggle, the huntsman lets Snow White go and takes the queen a pig's heart instead. Stumbling about in the forest, hungry and cold, Snow finds the house of the Seven Dwarfs and eventually, with their help, escapes Queen Brangamar, who still tries to please the witch hex. The parody version of Snow White appears in the 1933 animated short movie, Betty Boop in Snow White, named Betty Boop. When the Queen's magic mirror says Betty Boop is fairest, the Queen orders her guards Bimbo and Coco to execute her. However, they spare her by destroying their weapons. Later, Betty escapes into a frozen river, which encloses her in a coffin of ice. This block slips downhill to the home of the Seven Dwarfs, who carry the frozen Betty into an enchanted cave. In the end of the movie, the Queen's mirror explodes in a puff of magic smoke that returns Betty to her normal state and changes the Queen into a frightful and mysterious dragon-like monster. Eventually, the dragon-like monster was turned inside out, and Betty, Coco, and Bimbo danced around in a circle of victory. Snow White, a sweet and innocent young princess, well known for her kindness and optimism, appears next in the 1937 animated musical movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, as the main protagonist, voiced by Adriana Caselotti. She was the daughter of a great king whose wife died when the daughter was born. Her evil stepmother makes her engage in forced labor, fearing that one day Snow White's beauty might become greater than her own. Despite this, she is still cheerful but naive and every day wishes to have a beautiful life with her Prince Charming. One day, when the magic mirror said that Snow White is now fairer than the Queen, she sent a huntsman to kill the princess. At last, he can't bring himself to finish the task and leaves her to go to the forest alone. Because she has a friendly relationship with animals, she meets the Seven Dwarfs, who promise to protect her from the Queen, and takes on the role of their mother, cleaning up the home and cooking. After the Queen finds out that Snow White has survived, she disguises herself as a peddler and goes to her with a poisoned apple. When Snow White takes a bite of the apple, it sends her into a deep sleep. Upon discovering what happened, the dwarfs track down the Queen, and after a short battle, she is killed. Believing Snow White to be dead as well, the dwarfs build a glass and gold casket for her to rest on in the forest glen. Time passes and the prince comes across Snow White. Saddened by her apparent death, he kisses her, causing her to awake. As the Seven Dwarfs dance out of joy, Snow White and the prince go off to live together happily ever after. In the 1961 comedy fantasy movie, Snow White and the Three Stooges, Snow White appears voiced by Carol Heiss. The Snow White's character is the same as in the fairy tale, as is her necessity to flee her home after her evil stepmother, the Queen, wishes her to be dead. Seeking refuge in the cottage of the Seven Dwarfs, she accidentally meets the Stooges, who are house-sitting for them while they are away. Eventually, when the Queen attempts to track down and kill her, the Stooges notice her flying on a broom and kill her with a magic spell. In the 1961 East German movie of the same name, Snow White appears portrayed by Doris Wee. The movie's plot is quite faithful to the Grimm's version, and the changes made to the movie can be compared to the Walt Disney movie from 1937. However, the ending is changed as well. Even though the Queen succeeds in her plan with a poisoned apple after 2 failed attempts, Snow White is brought back to life after the dwarves knocked over the coffin, causing an apple slice to emerge from her throat. Invited to their wedding, and then humiliated by being offered a piece of an apple by the prince, the evil stepmother flees. In the TV show, The Mouse Factory, Snow White makes several appearances in the live-action wrap-around skits, alongside the other costumed characters and celebrity guests, played by Anne Gillian. In the 1980 Christmas animated TV show A Snow White Christmas, there are 2 Snow Whites now ruling Queen Snow White, voiced by Diane Pershing, the King Charming, as well as their daughter, who is also named Snow White, voiced by Erica Scheimer. Determined to get rid of them both, the Queen freezes the entire kingdom. Only the young Snow White manages to escape and take refuge with 7 friendly giants with her dwarf friend, but the Queen keeps trying to get rid of Snow White and her protectors. Eventually, the Queen decides to disguise herself as an old giant woman to trick Snow White into smelling the scent of a poisoned flower instead of biting into an apple like in the original version. In the 1984 live-action TV show, Fairy Tale Theater, Snow White appears in the episode Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, portrayed by Elizabeth McGovern. Unlike the classical story, when the queen finally comes upon Snow White, she strangles her with ribbons. When the dwarfs return home from work, they discover Snow White's body and remove the ribbons, whereupon she wakes up. When the queen learns that her stepdaughter is still alive, she once again disguises herself, and this time brings Snow White a poisoned apple, after which Snow White collapses. However, Snow White awakens when the dwarfs meet their friend, the prince, who kisses her. Next, Snow White appears in the TV special celebrating the 50th anniversary of the movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, called Disney's Golden Anniversary of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Here, Snow White appears in the memories of many celebrities as they talk about her. In the 1987 musical fantasy movie, Snow White, Sarah Patterson plays Snow White as an adult and Nicola Stapleton as young Snow White. The plot closely follows the story of the fairy tale but again modifies the ending. When the queen is invited to Snow White's wedding, she breaks the mirror in outrage, causing her to age rapidly. After arriving at the wedding, as the mirror falls apart, she shatters into pieces and disintegrates. After this, Snow White and the prince are married and live happily ever after. In the 1988 fantasy comedy movie, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Snow White appears as a cameo, being seen helping the disguised queen cross the street in Toontown to the apple shop, and later with all the other tunes at the end of the movie. In the 1989 animated musical movie, Happily Ever After, Snow White appears voiced by Irene Cara. The plot serves as a direct sequel to the Snow White fairy tale, in which the main heroine and the prince are about to be married, but now a new threat appears in the form of the late evil queen's vengeful brother, Lord Malice, and Snow White is aided by the female cousins called the Dwarfs against him. The next 1991 animated musical movie, The Magic Riddle, combines the story of Snow White with several other fairy tales, including Cinderella, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Little Red Riding Hood, Sleeping Beauty, and Pinocchio, in which the Snow White named Cindy is an orphan who lives as an indentured servant to her cruel stepmother. Her voice is provided by Robin Moore. Her stepmother, wearing a disguise devised by her magic mirror, hypnotizes Cindy with a magic apple to fall asleep. But in the process, she accidentally falls into a well. Eventually, Cindy and Philip's wedding is held at what used to be her stepmother's house, where the stepmother and her daughter are to serve as maids just as Cindy used to. In the Japanese anime TV show The Legend of Snow White appears voiced by Yuri Amano. Here, a young and beautiful girl lives happily until war breaks out in the kingdom and her father is forced to leave her in the care of her then loving stepmother. The evil Queen Crystal, aided by her bat familiar, attempted to kill Snow White, but the princess again ends up in the house of seven dwarves and under their protection. During the final attempt, she uses an apple to put Snow White in an enchanted sleep in order to take over her youthful body as her own. Eventually, the queen is revealed to be nothing more than an unsuspecting puppet of her own demonic grandmother, Lady Helen, a powerful and immortal witch who has found a way to keep herself forever young and beautiful by possessing another body, specifically Snow White. But Snow White's fiancé, Prince Richard, manages to kill Helen in a desperate fight, saving his beloved bride. In the animated TV show Happily Ever After, Fairy Tales for Every Child, Snow White appears in the episode of the same name, with a Native American Indian twist, which is about a beautiful young woman named White Snow, who befriends the seven mystical little men. She is voiced by Elaine Bilstad. In the 1996 animated movie Aladdin and the King of Thieves, Genie transforms Jasmine's outfit into Snow White's. In the 2000 fairy tale fantasy mini-TV show, The 10th Kingdom, Snow White appears, portrayed by Cameron Manheim. She is mentioned many times and is eventually seen by only Virginia and her grandson Prince Wendell as a dog in a white cavern in an ice-like coffin. She has been protecting Virginia and shielding her image from the evil queen. Upon meeting her, she tells Virginia her childhood story and that she is destined for many great things and gives her advice on how to kill the evil queen. In the 2001 direct-to-video movie, Mickey's Magical Christmas, Snowed In at the House of Mouse, Snow White appears during the final song, voiced by Carolyn Gardner. In the 2001 animated TV show, House of Mouse, Snow White makes many cameo appearances as one of the guests. She is usually seen with the Seven Dwarfs. She is seen prominently in the episode Pluto Saves the Day, in which Pete dresses up as her as part of his plan to put the house staff to sleep with some magic sleeping apples that he bought from the witch. After Snow White finds out about his plot, however, she helps Pluto save the day by telling him that he needs to kiss the sleeping staff members in order to wake them up. In the 2001 fantasy adventure movie, Snow White, the Fairest of Them All, Snow White is portrayed by Kristen Krug. Based on the traditional Snow White, the movie differs from earlier interpretations of the story in several respects. Set in a fantasy kingdom, it tells the story of Snow White and the attempts of her evil stepmother, Queen Elspeth, to eliminate her. Trying to escape from Queen Elspeth, Snow White also flees to the forest, where now she befriends Sunday, the leader of the Seven Dwarfs, and together they plot how to defeat and overthrow the queen. In the 2002 direct-to-video movie, Mickey's House of Villains, Snow White makes a cameo appearance alongside the Seven Dwarfs. In the 2004 animated movie, The Lion King 1.5, Snow White appears as a silhouette cameo with the dwarfs, where they join all the other Disney characters to watch the movie again with Timon and Pumbaa. In the 2004 German comedy movie, Seven Dwarfs, Men Alone in the Wood, Snow White appears, portrayed by Cosma Shiva-Hagen. But while the dwarves are planning a surprise party for Snow White's 18th birthday, the evil queen kidnaps her. So one of the dwarves, Brumboss, visits her in the dungeon and reveals that he is the king who disappeared 18 years ago, and also her father. In the end of the movie, he puts the crown on his head and becomes king again. In the 2004 musical show, Snow White, an enchanting musical, Snow White plays out the original role in the movie with a few differences. She remains in her work clothes from the beginning of the show to when she eats the poisoned apple. She is changed into her signature outfit when she's awakened by the prince. Also, she talks with Prince for a longer period of time when she first meets him, and her vocal range in the show has been lowered from operatic soprano to more contemporary mezzo-soprano, and her personality has been altered slightly. In the 2006 German comedy movie, Seven Dwarfs, The Forest Is Not Enough, which is a sequel to the 2004 one, Snow White appears, also voiced by Cosma Shiva-Hagen. Here, Snow White lives in the castle and becomes a mother. However, later, the evil one suddenly enters the castle and claims her child. To the day before, one of the Snow White's guards, Spliss, rescued the evil one from a trap. So with the evil one wanted to Spliss by giving him a wish, the evil one agreed on one condition, that Spliss must sign a contract with Snow White, so that her child will become his property. When Snow White asks the evil one if the contract can be undone, he tells her the way. If someone will reveal his real name within 40 hours, Snow White can keep the child. As a result, Snow White, with the help of the dwarves, tries to find the real name of the evil one. In the 2017 romantic movie, Sydney White, Snow White appears as Sydney White, portrayed by Amanda Bynes, after being banished from the most popular sorority on campus, the head of which is Rachel Witchburn, an alternative version of the evil queen. Sydney White teams up with a group of 7 socially awkward outcasts to outdo the queen at her own game. Jealous of Sydney, Rachel even hires a hacker to destroy Sydney's computer files using a virus called the Poison Apple. So nevertheless, Sydney wins the debate and the election, becoming the new president. The next 2007 live-action animated movie, Enchanted, focuses on an archetypal Disney princess to be named Giselle, exiled from her animated world into the live-action world of New York City and being portrayed by Amy Adams. Giselle is a singing and dancing princess-to-be who ends up almost having her dream of meeting her prince a reality. Over the course of the movie, she becomes more mature, even stopping her habit of singing in a continuous manner, but maintains her fondness of singing, kindness, innocence, and optimism. In the 2009 animated direct-to-video movie, Happily Ever After 2, Snow White appears voiced by Helen Nidwick. So this time she is a misguided teenager who'd rather have fun with friends, Red Riding Hood, Goldilocks, and Little Bo Peep, than help peasant. When Snow White's father is matched up with Lady Vane, a scheming witch preparing to rule the kingdom, Snow White becomes a thorn in Lady Vane's side. Snow White is soon tricked by Lady Vane, with the help of Rumpelstiltskin, into spreading vicious gossip about the townspeople, so that everyone in the kingdom will turn against her. So nevertheless, Snow White manages to foil Lady Vane's marriage ceremony and expose her as a witch. The alternative version of Snow White, portrayed by Ginnifer Goodwin, appears in the ABC TV show Once Upon a Time, where she is the daughter of King Leopold and Queen Eva, and later stepdaughter of the evil queen. Also, she is the true love of Prince Charming, mother of Emma Swan and Prince Neil, and grandmother of Emma's son Henry. In Storybrooke, she appears as Mary Margaret Blanchard, Henry Mill's teacher at Storybrooke Elementary School. In the 2012 fantasy action-adventure movie, Snow White and the Huntsman, Snow White appears portrayed by Kristen Stewart as an adult and Raffi Cassidy as young Snow White. So enchanting all with her courage and innate purity, she is considered to be the fairest of them all. The princess is the only child of King Magnus and Queen Eleanor and the stepdaughter and arch-nemesis of Queen Ravenna, who seeks to kill her to consume her pure heart and maintain her power. However, Snow White proves to be more than a match for the wicked queen, ultimately ending her tyrannic reign over Tabor and freeing her people. After Ravenna's death, William and Snow White are crowned Tabor's new king and queen. In the 2012 fantasy movie Grimm's Snow White appears played by Eliza Bennett. Here, she loves Prince Alexander, but the evil queen plans to marry him instead, so she wants to kill her stepdaughter. When the queen attempts to forcibly marry Alexander, Snow White manages to break free and decapitate her before the ceremony can be finished. In the 2012 fantasy comedy movie Mirror, Mirror, Lily Collins appears as a beautiful princess, Snow White. She also uses the help of a group of 7 dwarfs as well as a prince to reclaim her throne from her wicked stepmother, the enchantress Clementiana. Snow White appears several times in the TV show Robot Chicken. First, she is seen in the episode Punctured Jugular, where she asks for money from the 7 dwarfs. In the 2012 animated short movie Electric Holiday, Snow White appears as one of the models in Minnie Mouse's fantasy fashion show. Snow White also appears in the 2013 first act of show Fantasmic, where she dances with the prince to the song Someday My Prince Will Come during the princess-themed medley. In the animated TV show Sophia the First, Snow White makes a guest appearance in the episode The Enchanted Feast. She tells Sophia about how her stepmother tricked her by wearing a disguise, helping Sophia to determine that a visiting sorceress is actually an old foe, Miss Nettle. In another episode, Forever Royal, when Sophia is battling Vor inside her amulet, Snow White appears to Sophia in spirit form, along with all the princesses who have been summoned to help Sophia in her times of need, and they encourage her to be brave and strong, for they all believe in her. In the 2015 live-action movie Descendants, Snow White appears as a news reporter who reports activities in Araden, played by Stephanie Bennett. She announces that Evie, her yet unknown younger stepsister, designed Mal's coronation gown. Next, Snow White makes a brief cameo appearance in the animated TV show Mickey Mouse in the episode Wish Upon a Coin, where she is first seen humming I'm Wishing until she's interrupted by Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse, and then, during the ending, asleep. In the 2016 movie The Huntsman: Winter's War, which is the sequel to the 2012 movie, Kristen Stewart appears in the archive footage as Snow White. In the 2017 movie Descendants 2, Snow White briefly appears with her husband, the prince, in stained glass on the royal yacht. In the 2018 animated musical comedy movie Charming, Snow White appears voiced by Avril Lavigne. She is one of Prince Charming's 3 fiancés who is very distrustful and paranoid. He saved her from a near-death experience with an apple. In the 2018 animated movie Ralph Breaks the Internet, Snow White appears, voiced by Pamela Ribon. She is seen alongside other Disney princesses in Oh My Disney, where they meet net users that answer Disney princess quizzes. During the climax of the movie, Snow White returns with the other princesses as they spot Wreck-It Ralph falling from the sky. This time, Snow White supplies numerous poisoned apples and her discarded gown to catch Ralph, while the other princess gowns are used to parachute the bad guy to safety. Once Ralph is awakened by a kiss from Prince Naveen, Snow White and the princesses greet him as friends of Vanellope's as they befriend him as well. In the 2019 animated musical movie Frozen 2, Snow White appears as a snow sculpture among the snow people, made by Elsa in the movie's prologue. In the 2019 animated movie Red Shoes and the Seven Dwarfs, Princess Snow White appears, voiced by Chloe Grace Moretz. She has an alias, Red Shoes, that is based on a Hans Christian Andersen story of the same name. Here, Snow White is King White's daughter, Queen Regina's stepdaughter, and Merlin's love interest. This version of the Snow White is also kind, selfless, and a strong hand-to-hand fighter. Originally, she was a chubby girl with fair skin, silky chestnut brown hair with bangs on the right side, hazel brown eyes, and rose pink lips, but after stealing and wearing her stepmother's mysterious, magical red shoes, she transformed into a slim, beautiful version of herself. She can switch back and forth between her normal self and red shoes throughout the movie. Eventually, Queen Regina hunts down Snow White in the woods, where, disguising herself as the young Merlin, she takes Snow White back to the castle and turns her into a magic tree with a magic apple. However, the real Merlin comes to the rescue as he kills the queen with his magic and restores both the princess and her father to their human forms. In the 2021 animated short movie, The Simpsons Implusiversary, Snow White makes a non-vocal cameo appearance at Moe's Tavern for the Disney 2-year anniversary party. When Lisa fell over, Cinderella and Snow White picked her up and gave her a princess dress. In the animated TV show, The Wonderful World of Mickey Mouse, Snow White makes a cameo appearance in the episode Once Upon an Apple. In the 2022 Marvel Comics movie, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Snow White's footage from the original movie appears as Wanda Maximoff is taken to the home of her alternate version by America Chavez. In the 2022 live-action movie Pinocchio, many of the clocks in Geppetto's workshop are based on Disney characters. There is clocks featuring Snow White and the Evil Queen. In the 2023 short animated movie Once Upon a Studio, Snow White appears voiced by Natalie Babbitt-Taylor. Here she sings with Mulan and Asha near the end of When You Wish Upon a Star and sits next to the prince in the group photo. Next, Snow White appears as one of the main characters in the 2023 crossover special, Lego Disney Princess, The Castle Quest, taking place sometime after the events of her movie. She and 4 other princesses are summoned to a mysterious castle, where Ariel's father, King Triton, has been imprisoned by the arrogant hunter Gaston in order to steal his trident. The princesses split up into groups and overcome different challenges. Snow White, in turn, teams up with Tiana and Rapunzel. When the 3 princesses are chased by wolves, Snow White manages to befriend them due to her ability to talk to animals. Later, after reuniting with the other princesses, the group faces Gaston and Maleficent in her dragon form as the final challenge. Fortunately, Snow White manages to tame the dragon, who turns against Gaston and burns him alive. Also, Snow White angrily calls the hunter a rotten, no good for not being nice to animals, and the princesses escape, helping Ariel reclaim her father's trident and free him. In the 2023 animated movie, Wish, Snow White appears among the other Disney characters during the credits. As the character images appear in chronological order, Snow White's image with a baby bluebird on her finger is the first image to be made by star alongside Pinocchio. In the 2025 live-action adaptation of the 1937 movie Snow White, Rachel Zegler plays Snow White as an adult, and Amelia Foxshire as young Snow White. This movie is a sort of modern interpretation of the classic fairy tale, with a new approach to the plot, characters, and music that features new songs by songwriters Benj Pasek and Justin Paul. Here Snow White becomes stronger and more independent, which adds a new dimension to the famous story. So the movie retains the charm of the original and brings a modern take on the classic theme of good, evil, and self-discovery.